This video is brought to you by Raycon. Look alive, the holidays have come!
Punish!
But instead of an axe to the head, might I recommend Raycon's everyday earbuds instead. Wireless earbuds, headphones, and speakers offering premium sound, a super comfortable fit, and up to 54 hours of battery life are the perfect holiday gift for your loved ones, or just yourself. What have they done for you lately? They start at half the price of other premium audio brands, but you can already get 30% off by shopping Raycon's holiday bundles, like the gaming bundle containing the gaming earbuds and headphones. Look at how chunky the headphones are. Gets my 90s side all hot and bothered. Woof! While you can get these at your local Kohl's or Walmart, you're going to get the best deal when you use my special link buyraycon.com/somecallmejohnny. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/somecallmejohnny to get 20% off site-wide, or save even bigger and get 30% off Raycon's exclusive holiday bundles. There'll also be different deals coming throughout the season. I'll try to keep the description updated with the latest offers, but again, you can always follow my personal link to get the best deals available. Again, I wouldn't be able to do this kind of stuff without you watching my videos, so your support is always greatly appreciated. Now let's continue on with the show. Alright, I think I've managed to piss out all of the Dr. Pepper out of my system, and seriously, thank you all for all the positive response to the Donkey Kong 64 video. I'm glad you enjoyed it as much as you did, but we're out of one humongous game and right into another, and this time, it's Sonic related. Hot damn, I can't believe it's been 5 years since the last mainline Sonic game. Good God, that was Sonic Forces. That was a game outside of a couple of mods for Sonic hacking contest entries throughout the years I haven't picked back up and fully played since that original review, if you could believe it. It didn't help in my case that it was following the much more positively received Sonic Mania that year, and to go from that to this made only worse with the classic Sonic inclusion that in every way felt like a step back. It wasn't a good look. And it's not even as if it's a terrible game. I would still consider Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric worse, Sonic and the Secret Rings, and Lord knows much more technically savvy people for years have been trying to transform bronze into gold. It just still remains one of the most painfully average Sonic games I ever played that I want nothing to do with outside of maybe a few mods here and there. But with this game's mixed reception from critics and fans alike, Mario Kishimoto of Sonic Team believed that maybe it was time to move on from the Boost era and make a new template for future 3D Sonic games. Sonic's 30th anniversary was also approaching, and milestone entries tend to have a pretty big impact on the series, though your mileage may greatly vary on that. So whatever the plans for this next entry was, it had to be big. The franchise hasn't really been hurting financially in the meantime because, since then we had a couple of successful movies that I found were good watches, the IDW comics are still going strong, and there's even a new Netflix series starting soon called Sonic Prime. It's good to see that even if the games aren't always up to snuff, Sonic as a franchise can still hang in there when any other platform or mascot that committed as many flubs as Sonic has would have been long dead. You gotta admire that tenacity. Not long after Sonic Forces was finished, Sonic Frontiers was conceptualized, and would be Sonic Team's major focus for the next 4 or 5 years, the developmental time normally unheard of for a mainline Sonic game. And while I'm sure the COVID-19 pandemic has some part in that longer than normal runtime, I also like to think Sonic Team knew they couldn't fuck this one up. If this game really was going to set the groundwork for future games similar to how Sonic 2 did for the 16-bit era, or how Sonic Adventure did for 3D, this game needed to leave its mark, a good mark at that. So what did this ultimately mean for Sonic Frontiers Foundation? What kind of game was this going to be? When we got our first teaser, I was kind of just crossing my arms after I watched it because this sure was just Sonic doing what he does best, running away from his problems. I'm kidding, but it wasn't until I think the Game Awards of last year that we got a better glimpse of what Sonic Team had in store, and that was placing Sonic in an open world environment similar to a lot of Ubisoft games. Breath of the Wild was often a product comparison too. It looks like Sonic was going to face off against humongous creatures a la Shadow of the Colossus. Okay, well, certainly ambitious, but you know me, I gotta see the actual game in action. And initially, I gotta say, I wasn't convinced. It didn't help that the footage SEGA supplied IGN for the world premiere of the gameplay was like the equivalent of a wet fart. If this was supposed to get me excited, it didn't work. But then, not long after this, we get some genuinely decent footage that made me a little more optimistic, and while I'm happy for the turnaround, I was also like, you fucking idiots. You should have started with this, looks much better. Glad to see that consistent marketing still remains one of SEGA's strong suits. But okay, whatever, we got a release date, this was happening, we're getting an honest-to-God Sonic game for the holidays. Tonight I dine well, but last month I managed to get a free sample when I was invited to a Sonic Frontiers preview event in Hawaii. Now I already made a separate video on that, so I won't waste time on it here, but after finally getting to play the game for myself, I was cautiously optimistic. I think I had a good idea of what I was going to think about the game, but nothing's concrete until the whole thing is out. But now that I have played the whole thing, I certainly have some things to talk about. But be forewarned, this video is going to be spoiler filled. So for those who haven't played the game yet or experienced the story, stop watching now. I can't even give like a timestamp because I'm going to be using footage from the whole game through the video, so visual spoilers are going to be rampant throughout, so don't risk it. I mean, I appreciate the love and support, thank you for clicking on the video, but don't let me be the one that ruins it for you. With that said, let's talk Sonic Frontiers. I gotta say, before even getting to experience the story for myself, I was already excited that they actually got Ian Flynn to help pen the story. That's something I wanted to happen for quite a while. I think he's shown time and time again in the Archie comics and in the IDW lineup that he has a strong love and respect for Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not perfect, but fuck man, 8 out of 10 is still a good fucking score, you know what I mean? God, even today I still get requests to talk about Sonic comics, and look, one day, but that day is a long ass time from now, so I'll get into Locke microwaving his baby later. Complementing the story, they made a prequel comic tie-in, Sonic Frontiers Convergence. Although there wasn't much to this, it just sets up that Dr. Eggman is thinking about being a shit again, which okay, sky is blue and all that. Seems to be cooking up some new artificial intelligence to help achieve his goals, so I'm thinking to myself, okay, why is this gonna be the thing that ends up being the final boss? Well, we'll get there. There was also a prequel animation cooked up from Powerhouse Animation Studios. It's always good to see the time and effort dedicated to making these. I genuinely love when they do these animated shorts to complement the game's release. And as for this one, we see Knuckles stumble upon an ancient artifact he's never seen before during a routine Angel Island patrol. After managing to properly get it running when he inserts a gear that he found earlier after helping a little Chow, Knuckles finds himself suddenly teleported to an unknown location filled with a bunch of hostile life forms that Knuckles makes short work of until a much larger one, accompanied by a figure that looks more tired of this shit than menacing, manages to imprison him, leaving the echidna to sulk alone in his digital prison. I really like the vibe of this short. It's clearly a wholesale reference to Knuckles' opening cutscene in Sonic Adventure, but the mystique of his discovery and the creatures he encounters in the somewhat serious tone makes me curious to see more. So far, so good. But in the game proper, Dr. Eggman is seen getting drawn inside a similar portal after his new AI activates a protection protocol to save him from the impending harm after running simulations. I'd run too if I saw this shit staring daggers into my soul. Maybe this new AI ain't so bad after all. Sonic, Tails, and Amy make their way to the Starfall Islands after noticing that the Chaos Emeralds are being drawn to that location for some unexplained reason. Before they can enjoy the sights though, the tornado is suddenly pulled in by a mysterious force separating Sonic from his friends, with Sonic winding up in this digital landscape full of locales that reflect on Sonic's past adventures. The generation shillings never ends, fuckers! You know, I find it funny that despite the team thinking it's time to move on from the boost era, they still pull this kind of shit anyway, but I'll talk more about that later. So after running through Green Hill version 9.8, Sonic finds himself on the Starfall Islands proper, his friends nowhere to be seen, and a disembodied voice telling him to collect the Chaos Emeralds, destroy the Titans, and tear down the walls separating the dimensions. Believing this will also help save his friends, and because he has diddly dick to work with, Sonic begins exploring the islands proper in search for the magical MacGuffins. And in a short time, Sonic manages to spot Amy trapped in a similar prison that Knuckles found himself in, and by collecting enough of these memory tokens found by exploring the island, Amy is eventually freed, but still stuck in a dimensional flux, unable to physically interact with anything. And the energy that fueled the prison goes directly into Sonic, which Amy finds worrisome, but Sonic's like, bitch, I was a dog. But seriously, believing that Tails suffered a similar fate, Sonic promises to keep exploring the islands until he finds the means to rescue his friends from the digital imprisonment. Along the way, Sonic encounters this small, depressing-looking child alongside one of the dreaded Titans. Though the girl warns Sonic not to face the Titan, Sonic is quick to remind her who has top billing and attempts to fight the thing, and he promptly gets his shit pushed in. This young girl is named Sage, and is in fact the physical embodiment of Eggman's new AI program that is trying to find a way to get Eggman out of cyberspace, while protecting him at all costs from cyberspace's many threats, as she was also initially programmed to learn how to control the Ancients' lost technology for Eggman's benefit. She holds some influence on the creature's behavior and occasionally goads them into attacking Sonic, even if she can't fully control them herself. Still, this doesn't deter Sonic from being Sonic, and eventually after exploring the islands long enough, collecting the Chaos Emeralds after making a few trips to cyberspace, Sonic is able to transform into Super Sonic and thrash the Titan for good. While this will normally be the end of any other Sonic game, this is just the beginning for the Blue Hedgehog, for even after managing to destroy the Titan, Amy is still stuck between dimensions, so Sonic figures it'll probably take defeating all of the Titans to truly free his friends, so he makes his way to his next destination, losing all the Chaos Emeralds in the process, and the whole thing starts over again. And structurally, that's the setup for Sonic Frontiers. Exploring the current island, gathering enough trinkets until you have the means to collect the Chaos Emeralds, all while releasing your friends from their evil party ball and defeating the Titan of that island. However, while this may sound like a deceptively simple foundation, and for the most part it is, I feel that would do injustice to the vast amounts of substance contained within Sonic Frontiers' narrative. Saving your friends, collecting the emeralds, stopping the Titans, those are your end goals for sure. But it's all the little things in between those goals that make Sonic Frontiers' story stand out in one of the best ways possible. Continued exploration of the islands will eventually shed light on the civilization that used to inhabit the Starfall Islands. I think they're just called the Ancients. I didn't catch if they had any actual names, but long ago they took refuge on the planet after escaping from destruction wrought by an unseen force, and because they noticed how the Chaos Emeralds hailing from their world and powering their ship was attracted to the Master Emerald located on the planet. So that's a sudden reveal. The Chaos Emeralds are not from Sonic's planet. They came from outer space, and at first I was like, oh shit, that's pretty cool. But then I was like, well, wait a minute, doesn't that fly in the face of Sonic Unleashes continuity? The Gaia Temples needing the Chaos Emeralds to restore the planet when it cracks is established as something that's as old as the planet itself, but this game states that the Ancients landed on the planet only tens of thousands of years ago, so what gives? Well, even though Tails does reference Dark Gaia directly when observing the power of the Ancients' weaponry, I think the writer just forgot, unless, I don't know, there's a whole other set of Chaos Emeralds that they haven't explained. That only makes me think of how crazy and convoluted the comics could get. Oh boy, it's coming. I swear to Christ, it's coming. It shouldn't be that surprising to learn that the Ancients are also precursors to Chaos from Sonic Adventure. That ultimately doesn't matter in anything, but it's nice little continuity welding that Sonic stories up to this point haven't really made a priority. It's one of my favorite things about this game's story. Sonic Frontiers does not hesitate to call back to a whole bunch of Sonic's past adventures, mainly the earlier 3D games, starting from Adventure and onward. And yes, at times it feels a little gratuitous, like sometimes it just amounts to, oh my god, they said the thing! Eggman mentioned Maria Robotnik, they acknowledged the Babylon Garden from Sonic Riders, they mentioned the Deadly Six from Sonic Lost World. Some things are better left forgotten. Anyway, yes, it can come off as gratuitous, and it being so dense with callbacks can potentially make it alienating for those unfamiliar. I can imagine those jumping into this hearing Sonic and Company reference this and that go like, what the fuck are they talking about? Are these things that I should know for the story? Well, that's the risk you take when the team suddenly decides that everything is fucking canon.
I wonder if cream and sticks are free. Make a road trip out of it.
But as someone who's now in their mid-30s who have spent years experiencing all these stories throughout their childhood, their adolescence, their adulthood, I kind of feel validated. Like, yeah, these characters have experienced all that. They have explored these stories that they're constantly referencing. And my God, they're not just doing it for the sake of fan service, but it's a driving force of this game's stellar character development. This has to be one of the most character-driven narratives to ever grace a Sonic game. My God, the interaction between Sonic and his friends and the others is some of the best in the series' history, and I don't feel that's hyperbole. I truly think that's the case. The version of Sonic and friends we have here aren't from a run-of-the-mill status quo that exists in a bubble for the sake of not having to worry about continuity. No. This is a Sonic game that acknowledges and fully embraces past games, leading to everyone here coming off as seasoned veterans that not only have grown a bit, but aren't bogged down by one-dimensional qualities. Amy isn't the tiring, love-starved twit that spends her days stalking Sonic. This is the calmest and most down-to-earth she's ever been, though. What the fuck is this girly-ass walk she does here? Jesus Christ. Knuckles isn't a progressively stupid hothead who only thinks with his fists. They spend some time playing around with his long-time rivalry with Sonic that I swear borderlines on being straight-up homoerotic at points. I mean, the number of times they both give each other the fuck me eyes is more than 3 times, I think. They also spent some time highlighting Knuckles' upbringing as a lonely guardian of a long-dead civilization, complementing the nature of the Ancients that once lived in the Starfall Islands before disaster struck. I like how they set up that nice juxtaposition there. Tails isn't a fucking chicken shit in a day and age where he should be long past that. In fact, this game uses that infamously sour moment from Sonic Forces as a story element for Tails to feed into his shame of coming off as a constant burden for Sonic. A bit of this comes off a little melodramatic, but I can respect trying to fix something that folks didn't like from a previous game and doing some course correction that isn't just completely ignoring it. And it works. Works so well that even Sage gets emotional seeing 2 best friends look out for one another. Sonic, I would argue, doesn't get nearly as much development as the others, but I'd also argue that's kind of the point. It's more about him witnessing his friends grow and move on towards a life where Sonic isn't always needed. Sonic's essentially the same as ever, the confident, free as the wind wise ass that you can always count on doing the right thing. He essentially acts as the audience surrogate, experiencing the new sights as we do, with the occasional observational quips that you come to expect. One plot element I found kind of went nowhere involves this corrupting force he suffers from as he rescues his friends. Firstly, this has no effect in gameplay in the slightest. Sonic may be chronically suffering like he has a terminal illness in cutscenes, but in the actual game, he's still laughing like a chucklefuck when he tries to climb up a steep mountain. And maybe that was for the best. Imagine playing the game and suddenly they said, alright, now do it without jumping or boosting because you're suddenly dying, dipshit. That'd be awful. At the same time, I can't help but feel whatever plans they might have had with Sonic, from Sonic Team, Ian Flynn, or otherwise, They got cold feet and backed out at the last second. There's a point where Sonic's corruption gets so bad that it essentially kills him, or leaves him a statue, it's hard to say, but this is almost immediately dealt with the power of friendship. And to what end, I have to ask? To show us that Sonic's friends care for him? Well, of course they do. That's something we've known for years. I guess it's more for Sage's development, as she comes to respect Sonic, seeing him fight through the pain and all that, but the payoff for this still feels anticlimactic. I think nothing would have really changed if this plot device was taken out. Sage, oh man, there was a part of me that figured she wasn't going to actually be the main villain. Shit, as soon as I heard the disembodied voice, I was like, oh, I think I know who the main villain is now, but still, I wasn't sure whether we were going to go with this character. What they ended up giving us, as I feel my friends can attest, is one of the best inclusions of the roster since Blaze the Cat. What starts as an AI program that's mission is to harness the Ancient's technology for Eggman's benefit and act as his protector slowly evolves into a girl who, after constantly witnessing Sonic's determination and willpower and the admiration and love of his friends, learns to grow emotions and yearns for the love and affection of her creator as a daughter would want from her father. And the thing is, this isn't mutually exclusive. Though Eggman initially only sees her as a minion no different than Orbot or Cubot, her effectiveness in keeping him safe as he's trapped in cyberspace, not to mention being a constant pest for Sonic as he explores the island, slowly makes Eggman see her as an honest-to-God daughter figure. Finally, after all these years, Eggman has the answer to Bowser Jr. They really humanized the shit out of Dr. Eggman in this game, so much so that, to jump ahead here thinking about future games, I don't know how the hell they're going to keep him as the main antagonist if that's still the plan. We at least have a more layered Eggman starting with this game, so I appreciate it nevertheless, but man, I gotta wonder, where the fuck did they go from here? The overall cast is small, it's just Sonic, Tails, Amy, Knuckles, Sage, and Dr. Eggman, but I feel the narrative benefits from this, being able to focus on what matters without getting strained from having an overly large cast. I do have some issues with how it's delivered. I love the dynamic between Sage and Dr. Eggman, where it eventually leads. But to get more context and additional flavor text, you have to listen to these Eggman memos that you can only get from playing Big's fishing game. And it's not as if this game is difficult, I actually didn't mind this at all, but first off, what's the correlation between these memos and Big's fishing? Why do I have to do this in order to get more nuance in Eggman's story? When you're playing this game, right, every now and then Sonic will run into these abandoned Eggman stations. I think this is where you should have found these memos, or at least it should have been another means of finding them. Would have added more incentive for exploration, something this game is already bent on the player doing. But to add to that, I really think some of these memos should have been dedicated mandatory cutscenes for the benefit of fleshing out the relationship between Sage and Eggman. Without listening to these, Eggman's personal feelings for the girl near the end of the game can come off as sudden and potentially confusing, and the conclusion won't hit you nearly as hard. A misstep in what's otherwise a remarkably solid story that left me intrigued throughout, even getting my ass to genuinely get all misty-eyed towards the end. I'm not kidding, this game nearly broke me down. What a pleasant change of pace for Sonic stories, and I know for some of you this might be a little surprising, even a little confusing. Aren't I the same dude who, oh lord, over 10 years ago, said that the adventure plots were haphazard and sloppy? Someone who hated how serious Sonic 06 took itself? Someone who legitimately thought the lighter tone introduced in Sonic Colors was more appropriate for Sonic the Hedgehog moving forward? Yeah, I ain't gonna deny that, and I'll admit there are qualities of earlier 3D Sonic games that I do miss regarding its confidence in storytelling, even if I think the end result is still a mess. But when I just think a story is good, man, I don't care if it's Sonic, Mario, Kirby, Metroid, it could be anything. If I like what I see on the screen, even if it's not quite the tone I was expecting, I can appreciate that. And it does help that as I get older and gain more perspective, experiencing different stories from all manner of media, video games or otherwise, I can see things I might not have caught in my younger years. I call it character development, something I think Sonic Frontiers does really fucking well. It's a good balance of mystery, humor, and dear God, somber moodiness, but even that doesn't get overpowering. Nothing made me roll my eyes, in fact, my eyes are glued to the screen. I'm witnessing these characters that I've seen in action for so many years finally start to mature without it being exhaustingly try-hard or cringy in my eyes. You can hear it in the voice acting. Everyone acts more reserved and not at all like previous outings, and for the better. Amy, Tails, Knuckles, my god, Sonic. Never has Roger Craig Smith sounded so deep as the Hedgehog, but I found it something I only noticed in the beginning of the adventure. By the second island, he was starting to sound like normal everyday Sonic that I expect from Roger Craig Smith. Oh my lord, this has to be the best performance Mike Pollock has ever delivered for Eggman. Equal parts sinister, humorous, and most shockingly emotional. That last bit towards the end where he grants Sage permission to leave knowing that it might be the last time he sees her.
I know what I must do. I must leave you.
I understand. Go. Fulfill your function.
Oof, right in the heartstrings. I do wish a little more time and effort was placed on the cutscene presentation. Since after Sonic Unleashed, I felt this is an area that Sonic Team has been slipping on. Even in this game, characters move with an uncomfortable rigidness that just doesn't look very good. A few cutscenes, like when Sonic and company witnessed flashbacks to the ancient's history, I felt like I was looking at unfinished animatics. I think for the next game, they should really put more time and effort into the animation. Get the folks from Sonic Boom to help along, because I think for that game's many warts, it at least looked good during cutscenes. Or hell, you can go back to how it was in Sonic Adventure 2, or even Sonic 06 and mocap the whole thing. Now that has its own share of problems, but I think with enough dedication, it can work. A central theme of Sonic Frontiers is acknowledging the past and working towards a new future. And we'll know for sure if this actually sticks starting with the next game. God, I hope it's not just something for this game. Don't burn this newfound optimism and leave me a cynical jerk, you assholes, but I'd like to believe it's genuine. Frontiers is the end of one era and the beginning of another. This might very well be the last time we see the gang in this fashion, and ooh, doesn't that just make the hairs in the back of your neck tingle? What does the future hold for Sonic and the gang? For Dr. Eggman? We'll have to wait and see. But Sonic Frontiers is a video game, most importantly, a $60 Sonic game at that. I think the last time that was the case was with Sonic 06. And as much as I think they did a good job with the story, can the same be said for the gameplay, this new foundation for a 3D Sonic game? Well, it may not surprise you to hear this, but my answer is yes and no. They put Sonic in an open zone environment. The land is your oyster, but instead of being a criminal with a car or having access to all sorts of magical shenanigans, you're a blue hedgehog with high speed at your beck and call. You got a double jump to gain some extra distance if needed, a light speed dash to trail across lines of rings whenever you see them, though it was the weirdest fucking thing having to now press on the left stick to perform that. But it's better than having everything mapped to one button. It's also why they probably put the homing attack back on the side of the face buttons like it was in Sonic Unleashed. That took some adjusting, but muscle memory eventually took over. The boost being on the right trigger was the hardest thing to adjust at first. That's never been the case in any boost game. I mean, the closest I can think of is the run button in Sonic Lost World, but there's a difference between that game's top speed and this game's top speed. I still don't know how to feel about this, honestly. It gets more natural as time passes, and it was probably for the best when you consider some of Sonic's new maneuvers like the side loop. But at times, Frontiers tries to satisfy both the adventure and boost era crowds at the same time, with neither style benefiting as much as they probably hoped. Anytime the game tries to call back the classic boost era level design, the manual drift is gone, so every time there's a sharp turn, it's so goddamn awkward having to make Sonic turn worth a damn and not just clumsily rub against the wall. Sometimes the game will do the Sonic Colors thing when certain moves are suddenly available in context-sensitive areas, but it feels so slapdash. One of the cyberspace levels ripped from Sonic Unleashed is the racetrack level from Missouri, but without a manual drift at your command, the cyberspace equivalent is some of the most uncomfortably awkward shit you can experience in 3D Sonic. Actually, you know what, fuck it. Since I'm on the subject of cyberspace levels now, I'm just gonna go out and say, these were the worst bits of the game for me. For context, cyberspace are these miniature stages you can play for Vault Keys. Now, you use these to help unlock Chaos Emeralds that are needed for story progression. And you can score up to 4 Vault Keys per stage by completing it, finishing under a certain time, having a certain number of rings, or finding all the red rings in the level. They're bite-sized throwbacks to a bunch of earlier 3D games, though throwbacks are one way of putting it. The level designs are almost ripped wholesale from their previous incarnations, so if you're playing this game and you think to yourself, man, that bit just felt like Green Hill from Sonic Generations, well, congratulations, it is. But now, you also have worse boost mechanics and platformer control. The platforming, good fucking Christ. What's so strange to me is that all your movement customization that you could apply to Sonic on the islands do not apply in cyberspace. So it's like you have two different control schemes in this game. Cyberspace, I feel, being a step back in everything, the platforming being the highlight. I hate Sonic's jump. You have so much forward momentum that even when you're trying to correct yourself with a double jump, your turns end up being so wide. It makes trying to collect things like red rings an unnecessarily precise chore. The 2D section's getting the worst out of this. Now, this might be a little extreme to say, but I think they just need to drop 2D with this formula. These have always been contentious at best. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But at their worst, they could be so unwieldy, and they only seem to be getting worse with each passing game. Boosting in these also doesn't feel as good. You get an initial burst of speed, but then you feel like you're back to normal speed a few seconds later, and it just makes you want to hit the boost button again to reignite that high like a crack addict. Just leave the 2D stuff to classic Sonic. Remember Sonic Mania? Whatever happened to that guy? Let modern Sonic worry about the 3D stuff. That's what he does best. Sometimes. Cyberspace is Sonic Unleashed Generations and Forces, but worse. It doesn't help that as someone who does go back to those games on the occasion, especially for mods, the level designs still ring fresh in my head, so I'm playing these stages and all it does is remind me of better games, except for Forces. But now everything also has a green hill, a sky sanctuary, chemical plant, or a city aesthetic, and it never extends beyond these 4 choices, so it also gets visually tiring. I gotta wonder why, even when you consider the in-game reason for these themes being pulled from Sonic's memories, why only stick with 4? I think if they were going to commit to the bit of reusing assets, fuck it, just go ham then. Want to call back to Unleashed, then just bring over Unleashed assets. It would have had more spice to the variety. Even if it would be still technically reused, I understand that. This end result just feels cheap. The only time I found these remotely fine is when they called back to the earlier 3 Sonic games, like from Sonic Adventure 2. You can experience Skyrail, Green Forest, Metal Harbor. I think there was a City Escape in there too, I wasn't sure. Since these games were made when the boost button wasn't a thing, I think these callbacks complement Sonic's limited controls better than the boost era stuff, though I wish Sonic had a spin dash. They still suffer from the same visual stagnation, but I found myself getting through these much faster and easier than any other cyberspace level, even finding them pretty enjoyable. But cyberspace is only a fraction of the actual game. Shit, play your cards right, you don't have to play them at all. The bulk of Sonic Frontiers involves Sonic exploring the 5 major lands of the Starfall Islands, although it's more 4.5 since the 4th island is mainly a one-and-done venture that takes only a third of the time compared to the others. The main goal is collecting the necessary trinkets to eventually nab the 7 Chaos Emeralds so that you can transform into Super Sonic, defeat the island's Titan, and then move on to the next and repeat the process. Most emeralds require collecting these vault keys that you're supposed to primarily acquire from cyberspace levels or by finding them out in the open. But to even access cyberspace levels, you need a certain number of portal gears, which you can obtain by defeating enemies and mini-bosses. Most enemies are small fry, easily taken down with a few punches and kicks, or the classic homing attack. The larger guys though, I don't know if these things have a category, I just call them mini-bosses. These require a little more work and some tower above Sonic like Asura here. The game will make sure to remind you what their names are. You're given this brief intro anytime you get close to one. I didn't really mind this. It gives me a second to catch my breath and gather my thoughts. Some making me laugh every time I see it, like Squid here, because the moment you get close to them, it's like... I didn't find most of these guys troublesome. Some I even found really cool to fight, like with Asura, one of the first you face in the opening island. I liked fighting the tank, loved the tight timing needed for homing attacks, and even Ghost. I like chasing this thing around the island and stopping it before it sapped all my rings. Even without leveling up your attack power, you can take these guys down with a relentless assault and be on your way if you're looking for some quick portal gears. Some I didn't bother fighting more than once, if only because it takes too fucking long to kill some of them. Strider and all the damn grinding, Squid and that never-ending boost trail, the spider thing, that dive bomb section goes on too long. The shark, Jesus Christ, get it away from me. You gotta go through too many QTEs just to get an attempt to hit it, and if you don't kill it in one cycle while it's stunned, you gotta do all that shit over again. If there's a faster way to deal with this one, I'd love to know, otherwise fuck him. Combat in this game is not the most graceful thing I've experienced. Early on, you're just mashing the attack button no different than how it worked in Shadow's gameplay in Sonic 06. You can add a ground stomp as a finisher to spice it up for a bit, but you're still mashing a bunch, and it gets results, but it never feels very good. Sonic also has this parry technique that you perform by holding the shoulder buttons down. You time it just right and you can counterattack with a devastating blow, and for a bit this felt really rewarding. An honest risk versus reward skill. Until I found out that there's literally no timer required for the parry at all. You can hold the shoulder buttons down for as long as you want and you'll parry the attack all the same, making most combat superfluous. I mean, I get that Sonic's for kids, but goddamn. As you continue exploring, you'll earn these skill points which you can spend on this skill tree, and here's where you can unlock some of Sonic's more elegant maneuvers, like a super stomp or a variety of multi-hidden techniques that deliver the damage, but are still automated to a degree that still makes combat never feel properly free-flowing. You can shoot projectiles out of your feet, your hands, or circle around these poor bastards all you want, but chaining these together always has a clunkiness to them. Not to mention, most of these require different button combinations with the face buttons, the shoulder triggers. Most of the time, I simply forgot what button did what attack, so I ended up just relying on the few moves that I knew were enough. Hell, sometimes I wasn't even doing that. One of Sonic's default moves in this game is a triple ground stomp, and this ended up being the most reliable means of dealing with multiple goons at once, since that third stomp covers a large radius around Sonic, even against those that put up those annoying shields if you even think about breathing on them. I know the game wants you to use the side loop in these cases. That's Sonic's new move where he can create a trail behind him and encircle things to interact with them. Could be objects or puzzles, treasure spots on the ground to get a bunch of collectibles. You can even make a circle and spawn rings to your heart's content, and you can also make an infinity sign and temporarily get infinite boost. In this regard, I really like the side loop, but in combat, outside of maybe opening with it to get enemies to pop in the air, that's it. Afterwards, I'm either awkwardly dealing with one enemy at a time since Sonic doesn't have much and hitting multiple goons at once, or I'm doing the ground stomp thing I mentioned earlier. I don't think Sonic's winning awards in character action combat anytime soon, and I can't say I'm terribly surprised, but maybe during my next playthrough I'll see something I didn't. But portal gears are one thing, there's also a shitload of these memory tokens that you need to collect to help your friends. I know the main collectible are the Chaos Emeralds, but I would actually consider these the closest we get to the game's equivalent to, say, like the Power Moons in Mario Odyssey. Not only are these needed to get more out of the game's story, but you also get a couple of Chaos Emeralds this way, so if you see a token during your travels or inside one of the many treasure chests, open that shit up because some story gates are locked behind a surprising amount of tokens, and a couple of times I was caught off guard. I thought I was done with the bolt gates from Ratchet and Clank. What the fuck? You can find a lot of these just by exploring the island, as many of them are rewarded to you by completing the seemingly endless amount of small obstacle courses plastered all over the islands, ranging from basic platforming, grinding on rails with precision jumping, wall climbing to various degrees, scaling structures large and small. Really, there's so many ways to get these things, and while some of them may feel they reward you disproportionately, and some definitely do, the sheer number of ways to get these gives you more than enough options to fulfill the quota. You're never too far from a bite-sized challenge considering how many are crammed into each island. Challenges not just for memory tokens, but these power and defense upgrades and these little Cocos that you can exchange for ring and speed upgrades whenever you bring them to one of the Elder Cocos. I was really scared about these things too. I thought they were going to be as tedious to locate as the Koroks from Breath of the Wild, but outside of the few you find in treasure chests, they're randomly placed and don't count towards island completion. Thank fuck. Might take a second to notice them in all the other platforms given the game's unapologetic issue with graphical pop-in. No matter the version, and for the record I'm playing this on the PlayStation 5, this issue is always apparent. But after a bit, it's something I just stopped paying attention to, so I don't think it's a deal breaker, but I wish they approached this differently. If this was truly unavoidable, I would have rather the assets fade into view instead of just, popping into existence. Mapping out the islands is also another activity you can sink time in. It's kind of like getting Riddler trophies in Batman Arkham City, is the first thing that came to mind anyway. If you manage to complete the corresponding minigames, you map out the immediate area, which also highlights all the other collectibles and optional side stories in the vicinity. And this is cool and all, but activating these beacons are the only way to know what the hell is where and what your current position is, because until you do activate these, your map is blank even in previously explored locales, and there's also no mini-map on the HUD to help get your bearings outside of this proximity meter, which helps gives a general direction, but it's not as clear as I feel a dedicated mini-map will clarify. But I want to stress this wasn't that much of a pain in the ass for me. If this were any other open world game, like your standard Ubisoft stuff, or to mention Breath of the Wild again for the 50th time, I would cry foul. But this is a Sonic game. And what does Sonic do really well? Going really fucking fast. And the amount of joy I've experienced setting a new destination for myself on the map, blank or otherwise, seeing my destination beacon far on the horizon and just going about my way at Mach 1, grabbing what tokens I could find for story progression, what collectibles I can grab to help increase my top speed, my defense, my ring count, though I ended up not leveling that at all. Whenever you reach your maximum ring count, you get the super boost, and god, you go so fast, it's spectacular. But if you increase your max ring count, well then that means it would take longer to reach this state, so why would I ever do that? And your default ring cap is 400, that's more than enough. In a Sonic game, you bet your fucking ass that's more than enough. But anyway, letting Sonic cut loose and explore every nook and cranny of the island on my way to my current destination just never got tiring. It is my favorite thing about this game, I'm not kidding. Just exploring the islands, such a joyride. I find it so weird they thought we needed cyberspace levels, but on the islands themselves, especially as you travel deeper into some of the ruins you come across, there were plenty of traditional obstacle courses that were not only 100 times more interesting and original than what cyberspace offered, they were also more fun to tackle because of Sonic's better controls and speed. The 2D sections were still a little suspect, and I wasn't a fan of how often the game would suddenly lock me into a 2D plane with little rhyme, reason, or warning. The third island is full of that shit. I really wish it wasn't. And if you feel you're going too fast for whatever reason, the game gives you a ton of customization in the options so you can fine-tune your top speed, your steering, your handling, everything until it's just right. It's the most we've ever been given for a 3D game. No mods required. At the end of the day, though, it still boosts era Sonic, and if you were to ask me, it still doesn't compare to Adventure 1 or 2, but he doesn't feel as heavy on the ground as he used to for what it's worth, no matter if you're boosting or otherwise. No, regarding control on the islands, I have little to complain about. I always felt like I was in complete control of my actions, and I almost had complete control over the terrain until I occasionally When you just want to wind down while still work towards progression, boy do I have a minigame for your ass. You'll come across these occasional purple tokens. With these you can play Big's fishing game. This isn't like Sonic Adventure though, it's remarkably simple. You just throw your rod and hit the appropriate button when prompted. All the things you nab scores you some tokens that you can exchange for basically everything. Skill points to spend in the skill tree, Cocos to level up your speed or ring count, power and defense boost, and it's insane how quickly you can reach the level cap of these with just a few dedicated sessions of fishing. You can also earn portal gears, vault keys, and memory tokens, meaning if you really wanted to, you can progress through the whole game just playing Big's fishing and still earn chaos emeralds without ever having to fight a single enemy or going inside more than one cyberspace level. That is fucking nuts! Big, I forgive you. I mean, not really for this, but whatever the fuck this was. As much as I love the sense of freedom that Sonic Frontiers offers, fishing or otherwise, it's still got plenty of cracks. Some map challenges only activate during the night when they really have no reason to. I don't see why I can't paraloop these light fishers during the day. Why do I have to wait until nighttime to do this? Since there's no way to speed up the natural day and night cycle, I didn't see an ocarina anywhere. This means that you're waiting until nightfall. 15 minutes of you doing dick all in front of your imaginary Coco friends. I know you're supposed to do other things in the meantime, at least that was the intent, but these were almost always the last map beacons I had to activate because I already did the other ones beforehand because I could only do these at night. It doesn't help that these aren't marked differently on the map from normal beacons either, so it never came to mind during Nightfall to quickly make my way back considering how infrequent these were. The end of Island 3 makes you play a game of pinball. Sonic games have done this before with varying degrees of success, that's not the problem. It's needing 5 million fucking points. Apparently, Sonic Team didn't remember the time they removed the second Casino Street stage in the original Sonic 4 because people hated the fucking score attack bullshit. You can speed this up by grabbing red rings and increasing the multiplier and it caps at 256, and once you reach that, it's only a couple more minutes before you win, but that means jack shit when the ball decides to just fall off the sides or when it just falls straight down the middle. Shit that's completely out of your control. God, isn't there just an ancient sewer line I can travel in to get to the next Titan that way? This is thankfully the worst it gets, but man, did it leave a bad taste in my mouth. The music's good at least. During certain nights, you might be greeted with a sudden star shower. When this happens, items and enemies respawn, but you can also grab these star bits scattered across the island and spin this reel, earning you more purple tokens that you can spend on Big's fishing minigame. And you can get a lot of purple tokens if the stars align. This was fun the first time, but it quickly overstayed its welcome for me. It's two things. The event lasts through the whole night when it happens, so if you're currently heading to a destination you have marked, well, I hope you can actually see the beacon amidst all the other similar looking beacons that are now filling the fucking sky. Second, and most annoyingly, the slot reel that you spin never leaves the screen, and it's placed right in the middle of the fucking HUD. So even when I don't care about the minigame, the slot reel obstructs my view and makes obstacle courses harder for all the wrong reasons. I'm really hoping this gets eventually patched because there's no good reason I can think of why the slots were placed where they were and not tucked into one of the corners. There's plenty of real estate. What were they smoking? I also really wish Sonic could climb more terrain that wasn't limited to these context-sensitive green walls. So many goddamn times, especially in the second island, I wanted to jump across these steep cliffs or run up some walls at my high speeds and find my own ways of getting to my next destination. It would have saved me so much time with how much this island loves to fuck me with all the dead ends, but no, if it's too steep, Sonic just can't climb it, period. But the game is also inconsistent with this too because there are mountain ranges on the third island that are steeper than anything you can find beforehand, but you can climb most of these with some dedicated jumps or careful use of your drop dash. Yeah, Sonic has the drop dash in this, and I thought it was cool to use. You really take off with this thing when you rev it up in mid-air long enough. But man, imagine if this game gave me the adventure spin dash. Imagine if I could launch off inclines and get some serious air combined with the air boost. I salivate at the very thought. A few times, I also felt like the game didn't let me spread my wings as much as I would have liked, mainly because invisible walls halted my sense of curiosity. I recall reaching this drawbridge in the third island way before it became plot important, but you know, you can still climb it, and on the other side, you can see another island. I was still curious if I can make the jump to the other side, but that didn't matter because it's another invisible wall, and I was like, oh, come on. I think the game should have rewarded players for thinking outside the box. The only time it did, albeit it was probably unintentional, is when I couldn't quite figure out how to reach Tails for story progression on the third island, and there didn't seem to be any connecting rails or platforms to reach the isolated island. Although, maybe that was because of the game's problem with graphical pop-up. But then, I recalled that one of the enemies introduced in this island was a bird that you can ride if you manage to homing attack it, and look at that. I could now glide to the other island. I feel like such a fucking genius, but considering this is the only time in the game where you can do something like this, I don't think this is what the devs had in mind. And that's a bit disappointing to consider, but I wouldn't let that discourage you because I think exploring with your kit as is still more than fulfilling. My journey was close to 18 hours long. It would have been around 15, but I got caught up in fully completing each map because I hated seeing these completion totals anything less than 100%, but goodness, I don't regret any of that because I never got tired of just zooming through each island. When you collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds and face off against the Titans, any one of these could easily be final bosses in any other Sonic game. They're oozing with spectacle and hardcore music that took me back to my teenage years when I first heard Open Your Heart during Perfect Chaos or Live and Learn during the Final Hazard. Just to quickly cover this, I actually don't remember much of the background music outside of the battle themes. I love how the island themes get more dynamic the more story you cover, but even at their best, they're not catchy. And that's what I really look for in Sonic soundtracks. They complement the environment and mood, but it's nothing I can hum. The theme accompanying Osro is my favorite mini-boss track, very imposing, a great first impression to the threats the island has in store for Sonic. Now this might be a little controversial for some of you. My favorite boss theme might make your head scratch. It's not any of the main Titans, although they are fucking fantastic, they really are, no. It was actually against the final boss, and I mean the true final boss, the end, the large purple moon that suddenly makes you play a game of Ikaruga. Yeah, when I got to this thing the first time, I was like, huh, this is different. It felt very Kirby. Sonic versus a cosmic abomination that's nothing like anything he's fought in the rest of the game. And I knew deep in my soul, man, people are going to hate the fucking shit out of this. It's another sudden gameplay shift, and I normally hate when Sonic games do that shit. I gave the pinball game earlier shit for that, but I love shoot-em-ups. I'd love to make a video on some of my favorites one day. And I personally had no problem playing this bit. I loved every second of this, but still, it's a sudden curveball that I'm sure most people didn't ask for, and I imagine it came off as so anticlimactic for many. So Sonic Team, just don't do this. A traditional supersonic encounter is enough. I can play Ikaruga whenever, and my god, don't make the boss invincible at the end while it's fucking monologuing. Just put it in the end cutscene, my god. I was initially worried that I was going to grow fatigued of the whole thing, and certainly, I did grow weary of a couple of things. The cyberspace levels, some of the mini-bosses, those damn star showers, but the immersion I felt exploring all the islands and getting trinkets to help me flesh out a story I was legitimately intrigued by and felt was ultimately solid were enough to carry me through the whole adventure. It has plenty of small things that add to the jank, but it also has a lot of small things that add up to make it enjoyable. It's far from perfect, it's not even great, but it is good. I don't feel my time was wasted. If this truly is the foundation, the groundwork for future games, well, never have I been so excited on what the future has in store for 3D Sonic. But being excited for the next game is not exactly what I would call a selling point. So with that in mind, I don't necessarily think Sonic Frontiers is worth the $60 price tag now. So either wait for a price drop, or because we're close to the holidays, ask for it for Christmas, Hanukkah. Is Kwanzaa still a thing? Whatever happened to that guy? Sonic Frontiers is a good, heartwarming send-off to a modern Sonic we've grown up with for decades, but individually, it could be better. Still, it's good. There's something very bittersweet thinking back about how some of the worst aspects of this game were, over a decade ago, some of the franchise's best qualities. And maybe I'm a little crazy in thinking this, but I kind of feel it feeds into one of the narrative's themes of like looking back into the past, acknowledging it, learning from it, and then looking towards a brighter future. And I know, like John, that's just regular ass game development. It's always about learning what works, what doesn't, and then making a better product for the future. But I feel in Sonic Frontiers' case, it's poetry in motion, but there's still a lot of work to be done. It's promising, but too many times before have I been burned. Too many times the Sonic team showed me something good and then completely changed the fucking game for no goddamn reason. Just don't. Just don't. Please. Yo, thanks for watching. I love you. Bye.